Everyone's making out like bandits on a wildfire. I mean, except you, when all your stuff burns. And not these guys. But firefighters make good money, don't they? Well, they sure do. But these aren't firefighters. See, the Forest Service doesn't have any firefighters. Now, I know what you're thinking. He looks like a firefighter. He's wearing the yellow thingy and his face is all smudged and he's eating smoke every day, doing the exact same stuff every other firefighter does, but he's not a firefighter. He's a forestry technician. A forestry technician? Well, what the hell is a forestry technician? How should I know? I guess bush mechanic was taken. It's nothing. A forestry technician isn't anything. It's just a bureaucratic loophole that allows the Forest Service to get their men to do the work of firefighters without having to pay them like firefighters. As the Forest Service often will tell you, they are a land management agency. The base pay for firefighters in other agencies is nearly triple that of a forestry technician. You see, firefighters receive a certain pay grade called portal to portal, meaning when they go to a major fire, the moment they leave their station, their portal, they're getting full pay the entire time until they return to their portal. But forestry technicians only qualify for hazard pay when they're literally on the fire line. Forestry technicianing. If you're a CAL FIRE firefighter, you work a 24-hour shift, then you get 24 hours off in a hotel, and you get paid for those 24 hours off. Hey, you're not at home. Portal to portal. When you're a forestry technician on a campaign fire, you work 16 hours and then immediately stop getting paid. And oftentimes, you then camp out and sleep just off the fire line, unpaid. As far as the Forest Service is concerned, you're not in the middle of nowhere on a fire. You're at home in your own bed, fucking your wife. Why should you get paid for that? The smoke that you breathe during a shift on the fire line is the equivalent of roughly 8 packs of cigarettes a day. And not to mention the stump fuckers, the fire chaser beetles who swarm to burn because they like to lay their eggs in the smoldering timber and crawl inside your face. And when you're spiked out, you get all of this while you sleep. And good luck if you're on night shift and you gotta try to get your sleep under July sunlight. And this is the closest thing to a shower that you're gonna get for half a month. California hotshots are the most elite firefighters in the world, and their base pay nets less money than a kid working at McDonald's. All because their agency classifies them as forestry technicians and not firefighters. You can tell them apart, right? Firefighter, forestry technician. Firefighter, forestry technician. See the difference? Firefighter, forestry technician. Got it? Same job, less pay. They breathe the same smoke. They get lung cancer just the same. They burn up just the same. And they die just the same. There's a lot of stuff that can kill you on a wildfire, whether you're a forestry technician or a firefighter. And it's not just the burning. Rocks, snakes, aircraft. Widowmakers.
We'll do it live. Okay. No. We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. And things suck.
Welcome. Good evening, everybody. It's time to do it live. Everybody's favorite punching bag. Federal wildland firefighters. They are back in the gym, taking the punches. Oh my goodness. There's a reason we played that clip at the top of this show. And it's going to be more and more painfully obvious as we go through this. So, I took a break last night. We had finally the FEDFIRE memo came out. The announcement of FEDFIRE, which they are interestingly calling it the U.S. Wildland Fire Service, the USWFS, which makes perfect sense given that there's already a USFWS, the Fish and Wildlife Service. Like, yeah, that's never going to get confused. No problems there. Just call it FEDFIRE, for Pete's sake. Did Gavin Newsom turn the tables and catch President Trump in a lie? The answer may surprise you, or will it? You know, we're so accustomed to Gavin lying all the time. It's like anytime he's moving his mouth, we know that it's a lie. But there's a little Twitter back and forth between the president and the head of state of California. And the other question, is California State Parks and Rec watching our live streams? Now, those of you who have watched for a while, you've noticed a trend, right? We talk about something, and then the next day, it becomes news. It has happened now like 5 or 6 times. And it's now at a point where it can't just be coincidence, can it? Maybe it is. It's gotta be. It's gotta be. There's no way they did this overnight. Doña de California forwarded this post from the Santa Monica Mountains Conservation Authority. They're doing fuels clearance around Topanga Canyon. This, like the whole like Topanga clear your fuels thing has been a meme with us. I feel like I'm the only one shouting from the rooftops constantly about Topanga and Topanga State Park. Obviously, you know, we've been focused on this because it was Gavin Newsom's Topanga State Park that was totally overgrown, didn't have any fuels work done on it, and then it burned down the entire Palisades. And I keep reminding everybody that this is a giant threat for everywhere else that touches Topanga State Park, right? It's all primed to burn the same exact way. So Topanga is very much at threat. And now all of a sudden, they're doing some fuels work. They've even got goats. They've got goats. It says, the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority announces hazardous fuel modification work in Topanga Canyon area and at Upper Las Virgenes Canyon open space. That's a good spot to do it. Doggone it. Last beacon of hope, God bless. I saw that. I thought that today when I saw it. Yeah, dude, it's crazy. Like we've been hammering this so much. It's awesome to see this work getting done. You know, this isn't about like, oh, finally you guys are doing it. Just because we've shown a spotlight on it. Like, no, like take victories, guys. And there's going to be more on this. When we talk about Gavin Newsom, just because like I don't like political tribalism. I don't like tribalism of any kind, to be perfectly honest. We got to learn how to take yes for an answer. And we have to learn how to accept wins. The whole purpose of what we're doing here is we're trying to educate Californians who live in fire country to understand fire. Okay, that's the number one priority, because at the end of the day, if you are self-empowered with this knowledge, you can survive this stuff. You can prevent this stuff. Number 2, we want to advocate for common sense policies where we're no longer abusing taxpayer dollars and wasting it, right? And this is a good use of taxpayer dollars. Clearing fuels. It should be so freaking obvious. So I like to see this. I hope it's not just an Instagram post. And I've always said this, you know, everyone always talks about goats. We got to get goats up there. Goats are great. Goats are great for grass. But you are not going to have goats clearing 15-foot tall manzanita, okay? We need chainsaws and we need prescribed fire, okay? Goats aren't going to cut it. It's cute. I think it's nice. And I'd say yes and, right? We'll apply the improv principle to all of this stuff. Yes and, all right? Goats aren't enough. Goats aren't the goat. RX Fire is the goat. But I like to see it. And Sue Thompson says, and all the other state parks. That is damn right. So obviously, look, I'm biased. I lived around Topanga State Park for a huge portion of my life. I grew up in the Palisades. So of course, it's devastating to see that park destroy the Palisades. But there are so many other state parks like Diablo. Diablo is going to go up like a friggin' Diablo. So let's not lose sight of that. It's not just about Topanga. Diane Cotter, you know, Diane, she's saying we're trying to educate Californians who live in fire country. It's funny because I was going to bring up Diane later. So stay tuned, Diane. We're going to bring you up later. Super Pav says the most expensive goats in the world. Yeah, they probably are. They probably are. I'm sure there's some Saudi prince who has some like purebred goats that are maybe a little bit more expensive. But yeah, manual removal of fuels, by the way, is the most expensive way to get rid of fuels. Okay, California is very expensive to do prescribed fire, but it's, you know, maybe $1,000 an acre. I don't understand why it costs that much. It shouldn't. But like mechanical thinning, manual removal of fuels, that's more like $3,000 an acre. It's pretty rough. So we got to put fire on the ground. I can understand why maybe they're not putting fire on the ground right now. But guys, you've got rain coming into California. This might be the shortest fire season in memory. Look, how many times have I said this? How many times have I said it? This year is not it. It's not it. And I keep getting proven right on this. It seems like every week, nothing is biting. And now the great Richie Rich Thompson has predicted that we are going to get some pretty significant rain coming in. And was it the Garnet fire? It's so insignificant now, I almost forgot its name. So the Garnet fire is 85% contained. What happened to that thing? Remember when everybody was panicking? What do I always say about panic? We don't trust panic. I remember there's some people saying like, I saw people mocking the fire managers on this fire and the incident management team when they were optimistic about, hey, we're going to try to hold it here. We're going to try to get these firing operations. And they were mocking them for being optimistic about it. As it turns out, the fire managers were 100% right. And they've managed to corral this thing very successfully on federal lands. So the much maligned U.S. Forest Service, here we are. How many times do I tell you what studs they are? How many times? Here they are corralling this fire that people were mocking them over. This thing's just going to go nuclear. They've got it 85% contained. What that means is it is wrapped. That thing's wrapped. It's not going anywhere. So they have a mass demob of resources going on today. Hotshot Wake Up was tweeting about that. So all of the criticisms of the feds, dude, you guys don't understand what great work they do. And this was a huge motivator for me making my film to begin with. And that scene in particular about the forestry technicians, the way that they have been abused, or I don't even want to say that because they don't see themselves as victims, right? They certainly don't have that victim mentality. But the way that they're not made whole by the government, it's so maddening. And then to see Gavin Newsom piling on all the time, it just makes it so much worse. It's so insulting. These guys are giving their lives. They're all Californians, you know, all the federal hotshots and other, you know, federal wildland firefighters in California, they're Californians. These are California dudes. They're California taxpayers. And Gavin Newsom shits all over them because they don't wear Navy pants. And that is why, because they don't wear Navy pants. Superpav says, Garnett ran out of slopes to run up. Why do you think that is? It's because they cut some of them off. They did massive firing operations on that fire. So they did excellent work. So on that tone, Gavin Newsom, did he catch Donald Trump in a lie? He did this like wire diagram, like straight out of CSI Los Angeles. They're like highlighting Donald Trump's Twitter post, or no, truth post. It was a truth post. What do we call it? It's called a truth? Is that the noun? Casey K says, hey, the feds are so good. The log fire is 71% contained and they never had anyone working that fire other than some structure protection. That's impressive. I got to look into that. So Donald Trump, he keeps going on this line about the water. Okay, so he posted this truth earlier and Gavin Newsom pounced all over it. Now, we spent our last live stream detailing exactly why Gavin Newsom is 100% responsible for the Palisades fire. And I got some pushback on that I'm going to cover later. But, you know, I showed it in black and white, how his own policy manual for his own agency assigns responsibility to the state. Okay, so it's like in black and white. It's totally his fault. They hadn't done any of this work that we're seeing. They didn't have any goats. They didn't have any of these studs out there. They didn't have a tribal monitor. And by the way, that tribal monitor is there just in case they come across, you know, an archaeological site that's worth preserving, of course. This isn't some like woke DEI thing. Just so you know, this isn't like some woke thing. This is, dude, I remember going out there and my mom would tell us, you know, my mom's Choctaw Indian. She would tell us all about how the Indians out there used to sleep in the wind hollows in all the rocks around there. If you guys are familiar with Topanga, you know places like Skull Rock, you're very familiar with how the wind will hollow out these almost like beds. They're like beds inside the rocks. And my mom would tell us, I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, but she told us that the Indians used to sleep in there. So there's a lot of Indian heritage here. And of course, they used to set fire to this park all the time, every single year. So this isn't some like weird DEI thing. This is like a legitimate thing. We got to protect these sites and remember our history because, of course, past is prologue when it comes to wildfire. Now, this tweet. Let's go through the Donald Trump truth. I'm going to read it for you guys, and then we're going to go over what Gavin Newsom has identified as a lie. Shockingly, I have just learned, I can't do a Trump impression, by the way. that would be so clutch right now. Shockingly, I've just learned that Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, is in final stages of approval to build low-income housing in the Pacific Palisades. Now, I'm going to give this partially true. Here's the thing. We've covered this quite a bit, so I apologize if this is redundant. Scott Wiener, one of the most bizarre people in the history of politics. Scott Wiener, who's always trying to ram things in the back door, like these housing things. He's just trying to jam more people in through the back door of the Palisades. And they had SB 79, which he introduced into the legislation. And it was absolutely going to mandate high-density housing in the Palisades. There were several other bills that other creepy politicians were trying to push through. And because Spencer Pratt sounded the alarm on these things, they pulled all the bills. They pulled all of them, which to me, that tells you precisely what they were up to, right? They would all lie and say, oh, it's just a conspiracy theory that we were going to put wizard housing in here. Well, then why did you pull the bill? If this was just meant to help the Palisades, why would you pull it just because a C-list reality star was talking about it, right? We all know what they're up to. But they did not pull SB 79. They did not. However, in recent days, and I mean days, they've made amendments to it, and they have included a carve-out for fire zones. And this, of course, was my only debate against this thing. And the same with Spencer. Okay, this is really important to drive home. There are a lot of people who see Spencer going after the people who are responsible for the fire. Forget that they're politicians, forget that they're Democrats, forget all of that political tribalist bullshit. He's going after the people who caused his house to burn down and his parents' house to burn down and all of his neighbors. That's what he's interested in. So when they introduced all these housing bills, it's like, dude, no, you are not changing my neighborhood. We're not doing this. Now, people see this, and because the people responsible for burning down his neighborhood are Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom, everybody, of course, they want to dump their political pet project into Spencer's lap. Like, hey, Spencer, can you go after them for this? Can you go after them for that? The thing is, they've amended SB 79 to his satisfaction, to my satisfaction. They put in a caveat saying, none of this, and again, SB 79 is basically to mandate high-density housing within a half a mile of a bus stop or a transit, any other kind of transit stop. It's just this, look, it's a social engineering thing. I don't care to argue about the merits of housing density. My opposition to it was, if you saw how bad that evacuation was in the Palisades, why would you want to add 50,000 more people? And why are you trying to convert this classic, beautiful neighborhood into something that it isn't? Put it somewhere else. Put your high-density housing in Lancaster. You know what I mean? So all that said, they made a carve-out for fire zones. And we went over this a few streams ago. Their map is legit. It would totally exclude the entire Topanga area, Malibu, all of those fire-prone areas are excluded to the point where the evacuation zones, that the evacuation routes would be clear. I mean, as clear as they are now, right? So I don't have a reason to object to SB 79, and neither does Spencer. Now, you know, there were a lot of people trying to get him to say, hey, we can stop this thing, we can stop this thing. But if they've amended it to protect the Palisades, then what problem do we have with it? Honestly. I think the voters are entitled to get what they want, for better or for worse. And if, I'm not a fan of increasing density in housing, but I'm not a housing expert. You know what I mean? I understand wildfire, I understand evacuations. And so I know that it is a bad idea for fire zones. I can tell you that much. So if they have amended it to my satisfaction, I have no reason to oppose it. California voters should get what they want and get what they vote for. So once they changed it, I don't know, man. I don't see an issue with it. So the truth is, they were trying to jam all this high-density wizard housing into the Palisades, but because we bitched about it so much and Spencer was so effective with his messaging, they pulled it and they put up some safeguards. Now, you don't let your guard down because these people are scumbag vultures and you got to watch them. They were trying to get this done. We stopped them by speaking up. They're going to try to find another way to squeeze it in. So you just got to keep an eye on that. So, I give this mostly true, but like I said, I have to be fair. They put in the right caveat on SB 79, so I don't have any complaint with it. Moving on. How unfair is it to the people who have suffered so much? Newsom allowed their houses to burn. This is true. But he fucks it up by saying, by not accepting hundreds of millions of gallons of water from the Pacific Northwest. Okay. How many times have I gone over this, guys? I don't understand why the president keeps doing this. So he was right with his lead-in. Newsom did allow their houses to burn, but because they left so much flammable brush in Topanga State Park with no fuels clearance. That's how it happened. He's saying by not accepting hundreds of millions of gallons of water from the Pacific Northwest. Guys, California had plenty of water for the last few years. This is not a thing. Yes, the reservoirs in the Palisades happened to be empty, and that was a huge factor. But why were they empty? Because of incompetence from the city of Los Angeles and the LADWP, which is a city agency. They drained the reservoir and had it empty for a year because they just needed to repair 100 feet of tarp. That's it. And because they are so incompetent, and they decided that they weren't going to allow any water to be in there for firefighting purposes, everybody got screwed, and the Palisades burns down. But he's conflating these issues of like I don't understand where he's going with this like, there's some imaginary valve in Central California that he turned on. I don't know what that is. But there's also an issue of California, releasing a ton of reservoir water out into the ocean. And the thing is, yes, they absolutely overdo it, but there's a reason for that. They're trying to push a hydraulic barrier to keep from saltwater intrusion in through the Sacramento Delta. Okay, a lot of saltwater intrusion actually has nothing to do with that. It's got to do with overuse, but they have to actually push fresh water out to make sure that the water inland doesn't get too saline, and that's going to start destroying crops. So unfortunately, you have this frustrating paradox with California, where when there's a drought, when there's a lack of fresh water that's running off into the ocean and creating that hydraulic barrier to keep that salt water from intruding too deep into the state, that's when you need to release the water, right? And that's when people need the water the most, is when there's a drought. So you have this like immovable object and an unstoppable bullet sort of hitting at the same time. It's a big problem, but this has nothing to do with wildfire. Nothing to do. I don't understand why he keeps conflating this stuff. And like the failures of having the reservoirs full in the Palisades, that was a local thing. That had nothing to do with some like water from the Pacific Northwest. The thing is, this is such a silly thing to do because this actually gives Gavin Newsom room to say, haha, you're a liar. This is a big vulnerability. Gavin is so easy to attack on this stuff because he is 100% responsible for the Palisades fire, but not because of this mythological water from the Pacific Northwest. I don't know why he does this. And now, the low-income housing starts rising long before he gets permits for California citizens to rebuild, but long after the federal permits were issued. So, look, this is true. There were developers who were getting their permits first, and people are still struggling to get permits. Okay, so that is true. This whole federal permit thing, Gavin is saying this is a lie. The governor does not issue housing permits. Yeah, that part's true. Yeah, that's true. But that's not what Trump is saying. Trump is just saying, hey, dude, use your bully pulpit to get shit done. He's not saying that the governor needs to issue permits. Come on. Like, let's be realistic about this. Now, the federal permit thing, he goes on. Lee Zeldin, EPA administrator, and I, as president, have done the job and produced all permits long before anybody expected that to happen. And they says, lie, there's no such thing as a federal housing permit. They have been approved because they do not exist. Okay, this is a stupid tactic that people like Politico, Bullshitico will do, where they like misconstrue what he's actually saying. He's not saying that there's housing permits, but you have to get the EPA sign off because of all the Teslas and all the solar panels and all the power walls that burned up in the Palisades and turned it into a Superfund site with beryllium poisoning and all kinds of heavy metal poisoning. You have to get the EPA to actually get it clean enough so it's kosher to rebuild. That's the permitting he's talking about. Okay, and that was done within like 60 days. They may need to revisit it in some areas because I think some people's soil reports are still pissing hot. But this is not a lie. They're just trying to like misconstrue this. Unfortunately, the governor of California and Mayor Karen Bass failed you. That is 100% correct. And you'll notice he didn't highlight that as a lie because that is 100% correct. Gavin Newsom's plan to build low-income housing at the super luxury Pacific Palisades fire site. That's a great description. Super luxury Pacific Palisades fire site is what caused the destruction of the late great New York City Mayor John Lindsay's political career. And John Lindsay was a Republican. All right. I don't care about the political side. I just care about the realities, that people are facing on the ground. Gavin did have a plan to build low-income housing at the super luxury Pacific Palisades fire site. We cover this a lot. He even allocated $101 million for this purpose. Okay, so it is disingenuous to pretend like this wasn't the plan. Again, Politico did this same thing, where they take the reality now, post Spencer Pratt TikToks, and then act as though that was the reality always. So for the last few months, Spencer has been fighting in earnest. And dude, I flew myself to DC on my own dime to help make people aware of what was going on there. And we were getting action on this because Spencer was nagging everybody, and he has the ability to get people's attention. That is the only reason this stuff got rectified. So this is just a matter of missing the timing on this. But this was 100% the plan to ram this high-density housing in through the back door. We have the receipts on that. Okay? So really, the whole thing with President Trump's truth here is it's just this whole, like, the hundreds of millions of gallons of water from the Pacific Northwest. I just don't understand. Someone's got to let him know, like, hey, man, that ain't a thing. And it's got nothing to do with wildfire, right? The empty reservoirs, that was its own thing. And look, like I said, Gavin Newsom is 100% on the hook, but I cannot help but shoot you guys straight. Like, I'm not going to lie. Just because I think Gavin Newsom is at fault for this, if President Trump is misidentifying the issue, I'm not going to, again, this isn't about political tribalism. I hate political tribalism. I just want to see restitution for the victims, okay? Gavin Newsom's vulnerability here is he did not clear any brush on Topanga State Park. Do you remember this?
When you're saying that you're the one that's cleaning out the federal forest and that's the federal government's job,
hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars we've invested doing the work of the federal government. 57% of the state's property is in federal hands. 3% are in state hands. These fires, Camp Fire, the most deadly in California, started in federal lands. And this guy comes in and talks about raking. And he's serious about raking.
Yeah, he's serious about raking. And what are they doing here? What is his own agency now bragging about doing here? They're bragging about raking. This is what you need to get on Gavin Newsom for. Lying about doing this work. God, it drives me so crazy. Just stay focused, guys. I swear, I feel like everybody just wants to do everything but clear the fuels. And you get excuses from everywhere, like both sides of the political spectrum, from people in the community. It's like the only people who don't oppose this are the people who actually understand wildfire. But it seems like everybody else wants to do everything but raking. You say like, hey man, we got to get rid of fuels. They're like, how about AI? It's like, no, we got to get rid of fuels. How about more helicopters? No, dude. Like, unless those helicopters have a helitorch on them, that's not what we need. It drives me crazy. This is from Gavin Newsom, his own department's policy manual. This is from California State Parks and Rec. This is from 2024, right before the fire. This is according to their own policy manual. It says, the department's goal, meaning Gavin Newsom's Department of State Parks and Rec, their goal is to prevent all unplanned human-caused fires on its lands. Given that some unplanned fires will occur, both lightning-caused and human-caused, it becomes the department's responsibility to protect human life and to minimize damage to park facilities and resources from wildfires and from all suppression activities. Management actions for wildland fires on department lands involve pre-fire planning, fuel management, public safety measures, fire control support, and post-fire evaluation and rehabilitation. This is why this is Gavin Newsom's fault. According to his own policy manual, he is supposed to be mitigating the inevitable risk of wildfire. They say it right here. It is inevitable. It's going to happen. No matter what you do to control cigarettes and people starting campfires and fireworks, it's going to happen. Okay? He didn't do that job. That's what you guys need to be focusing on. Like, adding more water to the state is not going to do anything. That's going to have zero impact on fire. Just like buying more Teslas is going to have zero impact on fire. Gosh, it drives me crazy. Anyway, now on the topic of that reservoir, so we focused on Gavin Newsom. What about Karen Bass? What about the city of Los Angeles? Now, if you recall our stream about the Karen Bass's retort to Alexander the Great Robinson's lawsuit, where they were calling out the city and the LADWP for having this empty reservoir, what was their defense? Their defense was, well, that's not for firefighting, that's for drinking. What's this? This is the original article describing the San Ynez Reservoir. $2 million reservoir bid awarded. Los Angeles. This is from the LA Times, back when they used to do journalism. The City Board of Water and Power commissioners Thursday awarded a $2.4 million contract for construction of a reservoir in the Pacific Palisades area to a division of Aerojet General Corp. Atron submitted the low bid for construction of the San Ynez Canyon Reservoir. The facility will store 115 million gallons of water for domestic and firefighting purposes in the area west of Rustic Canyon. This was the purpose of this reservoir, to provide both drinking water, shower water, residential water, and firefighting water. They cannot wiggle out of this. So when President Trump says that Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom let you down, you notice that Gavin did not highlight that as a lie. When he says, unfortunately, the governor of California and Mayor Karen Bass failed you, he didn't highlight that as a lie. There's a reason, because it's not a lie. It's 100% true. And their arguments in court they're not going to fly. Now, speaking of a time capsule, there's this. This was from Piracy and Utopia sent me this. This is an old article from 7 years ago. This is from after the Woolsey fire, where they were talking about building fire-smarter homes. There was one particular line at the beginning of this article that really struck me. This one. James Gray Lacron was inspired to get into the field of architecture and home building after seeing the devastation of wildfires firsthand. I grew up in Pacific Palisades, right next door to Malibu. When I was a teenager in high school, there was a brush fire in Pacific Palisades that burned most of the houses in our neighborhood. What do I say all the time? Past is prologue. These fires are 100% predictable. They follow the same patterns all the time. And anybody who's lived here long enough understands that this is an inevitability. This is why you need to clear your brush. There's no avoiding it. Do you remember this from in the middle of the fire?
How long have you lived in the Palisades? And have you?
I grew up here, 1965.
Wow. Have you ever seen anything like this before?
1979, same fire. Yeah.
So this is a repeat of 1979.
Yep. I think that's the last time that it burned. Yep.
Aaron, we thank you for talking to us, and we're wishing you all the best.
Thank you.
Please stay safe.
Thank you.
This is why we don't panic, folks. I swear, the older I get, the less I panic about stuff. And the reason is simple. You start seeing things happen over and over, you survive them, and you go, yeah, this is what happens. And you notice how calm she is throughout all of this. She's like, yeah, I've seen it before. So all the people telling you that something's unprecedented, they're lying. They're lying to you all the time. Never trust panic. Ever, 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 ever. Now, we talked about the forestry technicians in the U.S. Forest Service. Well, we finally got the one thing that we've been talking about for gosh knows how long. We have finally FEDFIRE. Well, we have a memo. We wanted FEDFIRE, they gave us a memo. And there's a lot of buzzwords in there, and there's not a whole lot of substance. So I don't know if you guys all saw this announcement. This came out yesterday. And when I was in DC, I had a chance to talk to a few people at DOI and the Forest Service. And, it seemed like they were kind of, I don't know, a little bit on edge about putting this out. It seems like maybe it's not quite fully fleshed out. And when you read the memo, it certainly feels that way, because what it seems like is basically this is just a memo calling for more memos. Now, what has been the goal here? Now, you guys watch that clip at the front end of the stream. The whole forestry technician and low pay thing, it's so absurd. And, the agency has been hemorrhaging, and by agency, I mean the U.S. Forest Service, has been hemorrhaging their stud firefighters for way too long. And then when you add in the injection mandates, you got a big problem. You lost 40% of your firefighting workforce in the U.S. Forest Service. So they've been hemorrhaging dudes to CAL FIRE. A lot of guys are just becoming linemen. They don't want to do it anymore. So everybody has been calling for, hey man, we need to call these people firefighters. We need to unify. We need to let's do like a clean slate. Let's have a federal wildland fire service. Now, like I said, I think the USWFS, U.S. Wildland Fire Service, is a stupid acronym. They should call it FEDFIRE. And I will die on that hill because people are going to confuse it with fish and wildlife. Now, the preamble to this memo, we're going to go over this a little bit. Now, one of the things that I want to mention is that this is coming from DOI. This is Department of Interior, which has within it a few agencies that have some firefighters. But the vast majority of federal wildland firefighters are in the U.S. Forest Service. They're in the U.S. Forest Service. And like 90% of all hotshots are in the U.S. Forest Service. This is where all the studs are. This is where not all the studs, but this is where the vast majority of the studs are, is the U.S. Forest Service. It's like, this is the dudes who have the experience, okay? And this is the dudes who do the lion's share of the work. This is in the preamble to the memo. Wildfire activity across the nation is becoming more intense, frequent, and destructive, threatening lives, property, air, water quality, landscapes, ecosystems, and infrastructure. Moreover, ownership of, and thus responsibility for the land on which wildfires occur vary not only among the federal government, state, tribal, and private entities, but also among the federal government itself. This is true. And you see Gavin Newsom always picking a fight about, those fires started on federal lands, forgetting the fact that it's California firefighters who work for the feds doing this work. Given the increasing threat to the nation from wildfire, the hazards that our firefighters willingly face every day, and the inefficiencies created by multiple wildland fire agencies in the federal government, I am directing the department to elevate the wildland fire program to the status it deserves by unifying it within the U.S. Wildland Fire Service, USWFS. Just call it FEDFIRE. Our firefighters and managers will form a purpose-built organization capable of meeting the growing challenge of wildland fire response and mitigation. Okay, sounds great. It's a good intro. Moving on, let's look for some specifics. For the purpose of this order, unification shall not be considered synonymous with consolidation. Rather, unification shall mean the strategic alignment of resources, including but not limited to the following: physical resources like aviation and vehicles, pay, benefits, retirement, training, human resources, consistent application of firefighting strategies, which differs from tactics that are situational. That makes perfect sense. Now, the thing is, there's always conflict in California because the Forest Service firefighters and the CAL FIRE firefighters, even though they will be shoulder to shoulder on a lot of these fires, they have different missions. I don't think people understand that. The U.S. Forest Service mission is way different from CAL FIRE, and this can create a lot of conflict. So the U.S. Forest Service is primarily responsible for trees. Now, they have been stretched stretch way beyond that. Now you have federal wildland firefighters who are doing medicals up on the Angeles Crest. They're doing all kinds of things that are outside of their typical job duties. And yet they do it anyway, and yet their pay was never getting increased. And then we still just call them forestry technicians, right? Even though they're scooping brains up off the freeway on the 5. It's so crazy. It's so crazy the way that they've just been taken advantage of over the years. It's nuts. So it's like, yeah, I want to see this change, but it's got to be intelligent change. Okay, technology for early fire detection, because clearly this is a problem. We don't see the fires fast enough. Okay, I'm going to have I'm just going to try to get through this before I start ranting. E, modernization of communication and life safety tools to ensure cross-team coordination when jointly fighting wildland fires. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. It's good. Now, to integrate pre- and post-fire activities into a comprehensive and unified wildfire strategy, I hereby direct DOI in coordination with USFS to take the following actions. You know, all of this stuff is kind of just like gobbledygook. It's just saying, hey, come up with a strategy. Come up with a plan. Come up with a plan in 270 days. Okay. But this one is interesting. Work with USFS and the Environmental Protection Agency to eliminate regulatory barriers for prescribed fire and the use of fire retardant, including revising the exceptional events rule and permitting requirements within 270 days. Okay. This to me is important. Okay. The rest of the stuff is kind of just, I don't know, man, just seems like bureaucratic stuff. But this, eliminate regulatory barriers for prescribed fire and the use of fire retardant. Now, they pretty much use fire retardant wherever the fuck they want already, okay? Clearly, that's not too much of an issue. They're not supposed to use it within, a few hundred feet of riparian areas because it can be damaging to aquatic life. But ultimately, when they're dropping it into drainages, when those rains come, all that stuff's going in there anyway. So the thing is, it's like, dude, are we gonna use it or are we gonna not use it? They just signed off like a 5-year contract with Perimeter Solutions. So SuperPav is stoked. He's going to be making a good amount of money from that. But this one, prescribed fire, this is very important. And the biggest barrier for the places that need it the most, like California, the biggest barrier is local air quality boards like the California Air Resources Board and other local air quality boards that restrict prescribed fire. And it is a huge problem. This is what hamstrings the feds. And the feds do the lion's share of burning in the state. So Gavin Newsom is always complaining about, oh, the feds aren't pulling their weight. But when you look at the actual amount of burning that the agencies are doing, the feds are doing almost all of it. Almost all of it. And the state is doing very little. And remember, it's, dude, the state that needs to do it the most. Because the feds, they only have a tiny fraction of WUI homes up against their property. But CAL FIRE's state protection, state responsibility area, dude, they've got like 40% of the WUI homes. It's a no-brainer. Moving on. To ensure wildfire research and technology investments are fit for purpose and field ready, I hereby direct DOI in coordination with USFS to take the following actions. Now, they're going to establish a joint governance structure to coordinate wildfire-related research. Like, we don't know enough about wildfire. This kind of stuff kind of drives me crazy. Like I was saying earlier, it's like, we'll do everything but just putting some fucking fire on the ground. My God, guys. My barefoot ancestors lived here for 12,000 years. They just put fire on the ground, and they did it every year. And just like with anything else, just like with mowing your lawn, if you do it routinely, it gets easier and easier. If you don't do it for a long time, you get frickin' trees growing out of the grass. And now you need a chainsaw. Now you need to do all this extra work. It's so simple. What more research do we really need? We understand fire, heat, oxygen. What, like, seriously, guys? Conduct a joint review of wildfire research portfolios. We already know the issue. We don't need to study this stuff anymore. Like, this is a huge problem in the Forest Service, is the prevalence of ologists. Ologists. This is something that has haunted the Forest Service for so long. The purpose of a system is what it does. You guys ever hear that expression before? SuperPav says, I see some satellite contracts coming too for detection. Dude, you nailed it. God, you beat me to it. This is exactly what I was going to say, dude. A lot of these provisions in here to me smell like lobbying. To me, this smells like some venture capital guys in Silicon Valley who came up with a product that nobody asked for and nobody needs, pushing some significant bills to get these things that we don't need. Like the alert wildfire cameras are already so good and they cover so much of California that it's like, dude, how much you need to spot a fire 2 seconds faster? Really? Is this really worth $1 billion government contract when that could be spent on prescribed fire? Give me a fucking break. This is what drives me crazy. But a purpose of a system is what it does. So you might say that the U.S. Forest Service is a land management agency. But if 80% of their budget goes to wildfire suppression, they are a wildfire agency. It doesn't matter what your mission statement is. It doesn't matter what you claim in all of your PR. The purpose of a system is what it does. And the U.S. Forest Service fights wildfires. Now, the Forest Service, because their budget is almost entirely wildland fire, there are so many ologists who are basically hanging on to that budget. We're talking geologists, you know, that's the suffix that they're referring to. For example, the last Forest Service chief was a soil scientist. Why is a soil scientist running a wildfire agency? There's absolutely no explanation for that. Not a good one, at least. And there are so many links in the chain from upper management in this bureaucracy that covers the U.S. Forest Service that we're totally disconnected from the whole purpose of the agency. And that is what the hotshots do, right? That is the beating heart of the U.S. Forest Service. And that is the most important component, right? Those are the guys who know the most about wildland fire, and it is a wildland fire agency, nothing else, okay? Now, the USDA is the umbrella under which the U.S. Forest Service exists. So the guy who runs the food pyramid is also running hotshots. And there are like 12 steps of bureaucracy between the tippy top at USDA to a fire chief in California. It's unacceptable. The fire chief needs to be like basically at or right below cabinet level. So that way they can just deploy operators straight down. Now, getting back to this memo, they want to assess and make recommendations to modernize standards for personal protective equipment to ensure the long-term health and safety of wildland firefighters within 270 days. Diane, thank you. This one is important. Now, I wish they wouldn't take 270 days. If you will recall, the great Diane Cotter, whose husband developed cancer as a municipal firefighter. And she had a sense that something was up. And she thought, you know what? I'm going to check to see if maybe their equipment was causing this. And she did what God knows how many unions and professional agencies and ologists should have figured out, that Nomex is giving people cancer. It's full of these forever chemicals, the PFAS stuff, these fluoridated chemicals that is killing people. So the very people who are risking their lives to save us, and we think, oh yeah, they're all getting cancer because they're breathing in smoke. Like, nah, man, they're getting cancer because of their own protective equipment. So there's been a movement for quite some time to get people to wear wool PPE. And this should be done yesterday. I mean, I know there are ways to kind of like mitigate and offset the effects of the Nomex stuff, but for wildland guys, I don't see it being reasonable. Because, you know, it's going to get worn down from all the hiking that they're doing. And they like, if you're out there for 2 straight weeks, you got to wear the same blouse like over and over and over again. So there's no way that thing's not leaching into your axilla, you know? So, and the same with your brush pants, it's all going to be leaching into your crotch. It's not realistic. They don't have a way to do decon every single day. So they need to get rid of this stuff. They need to get rid of it. All right, moving on. There is to be established. This is important. And this may be the most important thing. This is what I've said because like so far, a lot of this stuff, it's just kind of bureaucratic gobbledygook. And it's kind of just saying, we need to come up with a strategy. So like, okay, why didn't you come up with this for this? So it's a memo just calling for more memos? All right. There is to be established a U.S. Dude, all right, I got to replace this acronym. It's so bad. There is to be established a FEDFIRE fire chief to lead FEDFIRE, to be recruited or appointed promptly. Good. And we all know who that should be, right? We all know who should be the chief. Because ultimately, with all of this bureaucratic gobbledygook in here and all these vagaries and nothing specific, it's really the chief, that meat eater, who's going to define the culture of this agency. And that is what matters most. The culture of the agency. Is this going to be a soil scientist, or is this going to be a meat eater with operational experience who understands what needs to get done and has the know-how and that meat eater, like alpha male kind of approach to like, hey man, let's get shit done. That's what's going to define if this is a success or not. If they appoint some kind of soil scientist or an ologist, they're screwed. This chief is to be appointed promptly. The FEDFIRE chief will be a senior executive service position. Outstanding. The FEDFIRE chief must possess appropriate wildland fire management experience commensurate with the position. This is good. Get the soil scientists out of here. While authority over the program, its appropriations, firefighters, and managers will be shifting to the FEDFIRE chief, line officers in the department's land management bureaus will continue to share responsibility for delivering on wildland fire mission. Pre-fire risk reduction, fire response, and post-fire rehabilitation and repair all require interdisciplinary work across numerous fire and resource programs. Restructuring will in no way impede consistent collaboration with land managers to ensure aggressive fuels treatment strategies, effective and nimble wildfire response, and thoughtful post-fire recovery. Nothing in this order shall be construed as relieving Bureau line officers from their responsibility to manage public lands in a manner that aggressively addresses their relevant wildfire risk. So to a certain degree, it's kind of saying like, yeah, we're creating a centralized agency, but not really. You guys are all still going to do your thing, but we're going to have a fire chief and maybe he's just going to issue memos. Is that what they're saying? To meet the instruction in the executive order to achieve the most efficient, effective use of wildland fire offices for fire response, FEDFIRE will reduce layers to ensure prompt, effective decision-making. What were we just talking about? I like this. We're talking about how there's like a dozen layers of federal bureaucracy between the cabinet and the fire chief. Again, this is a national security threat. Wildfire is a national security threat. I argue it is the biggest threat, is our biggest vulnerability. Obviously, a nuke going off in New York would be the biggest threat, but how often does that happen, right? But how often do we see wildfires destroy an entire city, especially in California, where they're not doing any fuels work, right? So this is the biggest threat. You've got the Olympics coming up in California. This is why I'm always saying FEDFIRE needs to be centered in California. This is where you have, like, dude, the original hotshot crews are from California, right? They have a legacy of smoke eating in that state. They also need the most work. They also have the most values at risk. So like, to me, it's a no-brainer. FEDFIRE needs to be centered in Southern California. It's obvious. And I think it's got to be, honestly, reading this, like they say in, let's say, Section Gulf, the newly appointed FEDFIRE chief will, as soon as practicable, review the distribution of DOI fire response units and assets and protection responsibilities. Okay. If this person needs to have fire management experience, then I think Bobby Garcia is the best fit. Bobby Garcia, Chief Garcia of the Angeles National Forest, he is far and away the best forest chief that we have. And he's done the most. He is the most innovative. He's got 5 hotshot crews. He was the first one to convert them all, despite all of that forestry technician bullshit that the feds were pulling. He still took the initiative and got them as permanent hires. He has the most aggressive initial attack in the country. And he's the one, the Angeles was the one that developed their night flying helicopter program. That was the first unit in the entire country to do that. And every fire that he goes on, every fire that the feds pop around the Angeles National Forest, they have between 5 to 7 agencies, all responding in a mutual aid zone. So his ability to coordinate multiple agencies and do it seamlessly is unparalleled. So I think that FEDFIRE needs to be in Southern California and Bobby Garcia needs to be running it. And then like all of the coordination with DC can be done over Zoom. There's absolutely no need to have anything else. You know, we don't need all these layers of bureaucracy. I think the FEDFIRE chief should be close to, if not cabinet level position, and they can just do all these meetings over Zoom, operate out of California, take care of our Western resources, get a whole bunch of fuels work done. I think that would be the biggest shot in the arm. Now, we have a big problem. Who knows what the big problem is? Now, beyond just the basic fact that I think a lot of this stuff, you know, pushing in the technology and the AI stuff, this sounds like Northrop Grumman or something, or Lockheed Martin has some like AI platform that they want to push. They want predictive services to become a national intelligence asset. Why? Like, that was another thing in the memo. Guys, why do we need some big overhaul of predictive services? Like this stuff is a big mystery. We have Rich Thompson. Why do we need national intelligence when we have Rich Thompson's Twitter account? Remember when he was out there warning us for like a week? Hey, look out on January 7th, here, here, and here. And then we had fires on January 7th, here, here, and here. Guys, we already have this stuff figured out. So when I see them talking about like all this modernization stuff, to me, it just smells like VCs in the Silicon Valley who've lobbied for like getting big contracts. That's what it smells like to me. Does anybody have a better explanation? Do we really need this stuff? Please, like, I'm perfectly happy to be proven wrong on this, but I feel like we don't need more predictive service. Like we already know how this stuff happens. Like, how much better can we predict this stuff? When you already have Rich Thompson's Twitter account. This guy's a stud. I think a lot of the stuff is predictable. I think the fire modeling thing, like, dude, I will say, and I was talking to the cunning Dr. Phil Cunningham about this. No insult to all these fire scientists and all this tech. I have to admit, man, the best people at predicting wildfire are hotshots. There's a few guys in particular. I remember Danny Brooklander, Texas Canyon Hotshot Soup. I remember he predicted the Beckworth complex when it blew out. He predicted exactly to the hour what was going to happen the next day. It was uncanny. I will never forget that conversation. There's some guys who just, and I know this isn't satisfying for bureaucrats or for ologists and technophiles. You just get a sense for this stuff. Like that old farmer who can just feel that storm coming in his bones. Hotshots, they've seen so much that they really do start to get a touch. They get a sense of what the fire is going to do. And I've seen them predict things so consistently that this is why I always balk at like, oh, we need fire modeling. No, you need more hotshots and you need to elevate them, right? We're always shitting on the feds, but these guys are studs. Superpav says, buy my $10 million annual software to determine which blade of grass will burn next. That's exactly what I'm seeing with some of this stuff. And, the president has said they're going to 3x the budget for wildfire suppression. So that money's got to go somewhere. But we have another big problem. This doesn't include the Forest Service. This is DOI. So the Forest Service still has to figure out their own place in all of this. And like we said earlier, the Forest Service is where 90% of the hotshots are, the most valuable assets when it comes to wildland fire. And their fire aviation management program also is separate from this. So how are these shaking hands? Like, it's great that DOI is doing this, but now they basically told the Forest Service, all right, now you have to figure out your plan. Okay. All right. This is weird. This is really weird. So it's like they're going to try to consolidate administrative functions, basically. I don't know exactly what that means, and I don't know exactly what's going to change. Like, are they going to change the colors of the trucks? Probably not. Is this just sort of some weird, like, loose professional affiliation? I don't know. Do you guys have any insight on that? But right now, this FEDFIRE doesn't include the U.S. Forest Service. That is your wildfire agency right now. How does this not include the Forest Service? I don't get it. Now, obviously, nothing's set in stone. It's just memos on top of memos. So all of this can change. It's just a memo calling for more memos. So I guess these things will be sorted out. But this is a big glaring hole that I notice, that the Forest Service is not included in this. I'm not sure how seriously to take this. But at least it looks like maybe we're going to get defined job positions. We're going to start calling forestry technicians wildland firefighters and get their pay on par with other firefighters. So that's a good thing. All right, guys, that's all I got. Hit me up in the comments if you have any other info. Remember, in this dystopian world of AI and fire modeling software that's inexplicably expensive, the only way to prove you're human is to do it live. Good night.